Hello, everybody. In today's session, we will be discussing something related to the cement of your research. In a way or another, what we are trying to do is to come up with a solid piece of research. To be solid, it's like a building of some sort. You have the bricks, but you need to have the cement that would glue this or these blocks or bricks together. This is what we call the framework, your research framework, your either conceptual or theoretical. We'll talk about both of them now, but keep in mind that last session we talked about the conceptual framework from the perspective of building your concepts through defining them, through measuring them, through finding indicators so you can observe and or measure them. Now we are moving one step further towards the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework and to see the relationship between them. One thing that I'd like you to look at is the definition I'm putting here together for theoretical framework. A theoretical framework is a model, theory, philosophy, or even an expert opinion that would link your concepts together so you can eventually and adequately test your hypothesis or answer your research question. It's more like lens. It's more like spotting light. Okay, if imagine yourself, you're getting into a room that is full of so many things: books, pens, chairs, CDs, machines, telephones, so many things. But when you go in there and you are searching for, let's assume, a marker. So when you see a chair, no, this is not a marker. When you see a computer screen, no, this is not a marker. When you see a table, no, this is not a marker. You are not searching for all the things. You are searching for a marker. The same thing. The theoretical framework is an attempt, or it's a way, a tool to make you focus on what you are searching for so you can eventually answer your question, research question, or test your hypothesis. Okay? So it's a perspective, a lens, a way of thinking so it would eventually take you to get the information you need for your dissertation or thesis or project or whatever. Of course, in general, there are so many lenses, maybe psychological lenses, social theories, organizational theories, economic theories, institutional, and so on, that can be used to do what? To define concepts. Remember last session we talked about concepts and conceptualization, and we can conceptualize using different techniques, including to give examples, to have a list of what would be the manifestations of your concept and what is not a part of your concept and so on. The theoretical framework is there as well to help you doing that, to define your concept. What do you mean by substructure, what Karl Marx called substructure or superstructure? What do you mean by that? What does it mean when Karl Marx and Marxists describe the state as the executive committee of the economically dominant class? The state is the executive committee. It is a tool in the hands of the economically dominant class. What does it mean? So here, what is the state? So the state, according to the Marxist theoretical framework, means 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is not the case when we talk about the state from the modernization point of view. So here you are not going to be defining the concept based on your own personal biases or knowledge. Maybe you know very little about the subject. But if you read more, you can find so many other definitions. When we talk about civil society, what's civil society? Okay, so Alex de Tocqueville, when he visited the United States, ended up saying that the United States is going to be a solid democratic country, mainly because it has a solid civil society. What's civil society? Hegel talked about civil society. What's Hegel's civil society? So here what I'm saying is, when you have a theoretical framework of some sort, this theoretical framework will eventually help you define your concepts, because it is not going to be your personal decision to define it the way you like. No, it has to be based on well-established schools of thought, schools of analysis, schools of data collection in your field. Okay, so it can help you define concepts. It's a conceptualization. Actually provide that verifiable claims. Like Barrington Moore said, if you have a strong middle class, so you're going to have a strong democracy. Okay, what's middle class? What did he mean by middle class? Those who did research about middle class after him, how did they define middle class? How did they measure middle class? And what does it mean to have a strong democracy? So does India, for instance, have a strong middle class? That's why it has democracy. Or maybe it's one of the possible scenarios that you have a strong middle class, that's why you have a democracy. In some cases, you might have a weak middle class, but you have, for instance, a committed, democratically committed elite, and so on. So what I'm saying is, if you are going to have a theoretical framework, it's going to help you provide verifiable claims, saying that, oh, according to the modernization school, it says that if you get to the point where the GDP per capita in a country is around a certain number, then the demands will move from the economic demands, from socioeconomic demands to become political demands. We want to have democracy. Some people say South Korea, for instance, they kept modernizing economically till they got to the point in late 80s until they became rich enough, globalized enough, part of the world enough, to the extent that they started to say, why we don't have democracy? Why don't we have democracy like Japan? We imitated Japan as Southern Koreans in economic decisions, in industrialization for exportation. Okay, why don't we imitate them politically as well? So the modernization school sometimes is quoted to be the explanatory framework, the theoretical framework to explain why next meaning newly industrialized countries become democracies. Okay, so the modernization school might help us perceive it from the lenses of economic performance. Economic development will eventually lead to political democracy. Or somebody might say, oh, okay, but China had economic development, but did not have a political democracy. Modernization school, new modernization school experts would say, not enough. What China had or has achieved so far is not enough till it eventually would have a strong middle class that would eventually ask for democracy and democratization. Okay, it's again, this is a claim coming from a theoretical framework that's called modernization school. Okay, what about the Marxist theoretical framework? It focuses as well on the economic aspects as an independent variable. Okay, but here it sees it to be a tool to control the state with its contents. Like what? Economically dominant class makes sure that it uses the state to appease or to coerce the masses. So from the Marxist theoretical framework, no, the more countries are advanced economically, they are going to be less democratic from his perspective, unless a revolution happens. So Marxists believe that, no, the elite, the economically dominant elite, will do everything in their capacity to make sure that there is no independent middle class that would eventually lead to democracy and democratization. What will happen is the state will become more advanced economically to be more able to control the minds of the masses, of the proletariat and so on. So It is exactly the opposite of the modernization school. From Marxists and Marxists theoretical framework, actually economic development is inversely related to democratization. Again, unless a revolution takes place. That's why, from their perspective, the state would eventually, we need the theoretical framework will provide us with the rationale, with logic, why this is the case. The Marxist framework, theoretical framework, will take us into the road, or sorry, the road or the route of the state becomes so advanced that it would control more and more of the substructure, including media, including religion, including ideas, including internet, including education, including prisons, including social norms, including everything. So people would eventually all the time believe that they do not need freedom. They just need more money, more welfare services. So here the Marxist theoretical framework would say, why China is not democratic, because its economic achievement is making the people more satisfied with their economic rights, socioeconomic rights, than they are in need of their political and democratic rights. So here, the theoretical framework is helping me make sense of the variables that are based on concepts. So what is the relationship between the state and democracy? Modernization is going to say, if the state develops economically, then it has to be transformed at some point to become democratic. From a Marxist point of view, no, the state, meaning the economically dominant class, will use the state to make sure that economic welfare will not be translated into democratic demands. Okay, another theoretical framework might be power forms. So many people studied the concept power and how it is distributed in a society, what its forms are, starting from convincing people, ending with violence against people, and in between you can bribe them, you can coerce them, and so on. And relations, how power relations in society are distributed. Okay, do we have enough civil society organizations? Do we have free media or no, and so on? So again, you can use power as a theoretical framework. And actually, power can be a conceptual framework too, because power is a concept that has been studied and actually overstudied. People who did political theory or political philosophy remember the social contract. This can be a good, a viable framework. You can examine it in a way. I guess I have to make it capital. Okay, since everything about that is capital. Okay. So the social contract framework can help you. There is a contract of some sort between those who are in power and those who are not in power. Can I use the social contract framework to explain some phenomenon that happened around us? Yes, maybe. Can you claim that Mubarak breached the contract with the Egyptian people, so people ousted him from office? If you want to do that, you can do that. But you need to go back to the social contract main claims. What did Hobbes say? What did Locke say? What did Rousseau said? What did Jean Rawls say? All these people used the concept of the social contract, and they have certain sayings and assumptions and claims. You can examine that. Can you claim that when Iraqis rebelled or revolted along with the American invasion in 2003, this was some kind of a Hobbesian state? And somehow when they revolted against the state, they did not only revolt against the rulers, but they revolted as well against the sovereign, which is the state itself. Would you like to use that? Okay, so what is the difference between social contract in Egyptian context and social context in Iraqi or Syrian or Yemeni context here? Again, social contract will help you a bit in this regard, but you need as well to think beyond the social contract to understand the nature of the society that got into this social contract. Is the Egyptian society, is the fabric of the social fabric of the Egyptian society like the social fabric of the Syrian or Iraqi or Libyan or Yemeni social fabric? Okay. This takes me to a question that is often asked by students, which is what is the difference between, what is the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework? Easier than you might think. But let me first, I need to highlight it so you can guys recognize it as an important question. Okay. A theoretical framework is more of a ready-made tradition that you might slightly or significantly modify to fit your research question with reasoning. What I mean by that is it is ready-made. It is already there. I mean, the Marxist tradition, you are not going to invent the Marxist tradition. It's already there. You see, Marx has been writing since mid-19th century, and new Marxists have been contributing to understanding the world we live in for centuries. You can use it as is, as a ready-made, or you can slightly modify it, or you can significantly change it, but you need to give us sound reasoning. You can say, I am part, this piece of research, your dissertation is or falls in the Marxist tradition or neo-Marxist tradition. However, I need I will do some modifications, which is instead of using it this way, I'm going to be using it that way. For instance, you guys are discussing, for instance, globalization. Actually, Marx believed that there will be a domino effect. That is, societies will learn from each other. And once there is a revolution, a socialist revolution, according to Marx, is going to happen in one industrialized country, and it's going to move very quickly from one industrialized country to another industrialized, and third and fourth and 15th and so on. So he believed that somehow, once a socialist revolution takes place, it's going to spread throughout the world. So some kind of globalization of the socialist revolution. Okay, if I take this concept, can I use it from my perspective in this piece of research, your piece of research that you are doing for your dissertation? Can I use it to examine if globalization will lead to the same thing? But here it is not going to become a socialist revolution, it become a capitalist revolution. Maybe actually it's going to be the opposite. Like Marx, for instance, told us that he expected the socialist revolution to happen first in Britain because it was the most advanced capitalist industrialized society. But actually when it happened, the socialist revolution, in reality, when it happened in Russia and in China. You see, and these were two of the least economically developed societies. Okay, so you can think of what Marx predicted did not happen because the revolution did not happen in economically advanced capitalist societies. They happened in agrarian societies. So now it might be a new revolution, but it's not going to be towards socialism, it's going to be toward capitalism. Again, what I'm trying to say here is that you can modify the ready-made Marxist tradition, for instance. So this is the theoretical framework that's coming from a theory, from a model of some sort. Okay, that's why remember, it's a models, theories, philosophies, or even opinion or experts' opinion. People who are have been examining a country for so long. Like for instance, Bill Springborg when he talked about Egypt, he said the politics of Shilla. And instead of Ibn Khaldun's Asabiyya, that's a concept that Ibn Khaldun used in the 15th century. Springborg used the concept of Shilla politics. In Egypt, we don't have this asabiyya, but we have shilla. That is a group of people who have some kind of friendly relationships because of being colleagues in college or in work or whatever. They eventually end up being the ruling elite of a country. And he was talking mainly about the period during Nasser and Sadat. Okay, so this was an expert opinion, Springborg concept of shilla politics. Okay, so a conceptual framework is your own structure of concepts. Okay, your own here, it's you. You are coming up with structure of concepts. Of course, you have to define and conceptualize this concept, and you need to come up with your own reading of interrelated concepts. You're gonna tell me what you understood, how you are going to link this concept together. For instance, you might want to use the concept of the state in its relation to the concept of civil society and power, concepts of civil society and power, to examine the relationship between them in a democratically established society versus an emerging society, emerging democracy. So what I'm trying to say here is you might want to come up with your own conceptual framework if you want, or you can simply use an already well-established theoretical framework, a model that you are using from somebody else, and you can relate it together. And of course, you can make the modification. You see, I'm said what here? Slightly modify or significantly modify. You can modify the theoretical framework through your conceptual framework. I'll give you an example so you don't forget this. How can we relate, or you can relate a concept such as political demands to political institutions to explain how and why political instability occurs, as Samuel Huntington did. If you remember this equation, he said political instability equals what? Equals political demands divided by political institutions. Okay, that's a process of conceptualization that he did and he tested. Okay, what do you mean by that? What did he mean by that? Okay, if the demands increase to the extent that the institutions cannot handle or suppress, then political instability will increase. Imagine that suddenly in Egypt, people, like so many people came out asking for free, fair elections, and people are asking for better employment conditions, and Christians want more whatever rights for Christians, and Islamists are coming out to ask for more, for applying Sharia, and people in Nubia want whatever autonomy, and so on. All these people, all of them together are coming out. And women are going out to amend the constitution to give them more rights. All these are political demands. If the political demands have become like 25, and political institutions are the same, are not handling them, are not responding to them, either by saying, okay, we will take that into consideration, we'll amend the constitution, we'll blah, 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 or coerce them, just smash them. If they cannot, the institutions cannot do that, are not agile enough, are not strong enough, are not legitimate enough, then political instability will increase. So what did this gentleman, Samuel Huntington, do? He did conceptualization. He created that. Okay, he made this relationship between these three concepts. Political instability equals political demand divided by political institutions. So if you put it another way, those who asked Mubarak first on January 25th revolution, people went out at the beginning just to disband the cabinet and to dissolve the parliament. They did not want Mubarak to go away. Nobody said that until maybe 5 or 6 days later. Had he responded to that saying, okay, no parliament, no cabinet, asked Ahmed Nazif, the prime minister then, to resign, and Habib al-Adli, Minister of Interior Affairs, and said that I'm going to dissolve the parliament. These are the political ones, so political institutions responded, so no political instability. Most people then would have gone home, right? And political instability would have gone down, maybe. Okay, so what I'm saying is this is at the time was a conceptual framework. For you now, this is not a conceptual framework. This is a theoretical framework. If you are going to use it, then you are going to say, I am using the conceptual framework or the theoretical framework provided by Samuel Huntington. Okay, you can create something like that, saying I'm going to see the relationship between X, Y, Z. So X is a concept, Y is a concept, Z is a concept, and so on. Okay. In some pieces of research, you might need both, especially if you are going to slightly or significantly modify the theoretical framework to fit your research question. Okay, you might take an approach or a theoretical framework that was adopted by somebody else, but you need to modify it a bit. If you are going to modify it, then you will need to do conceptualization, to take a concept and to redefine it, of course, in a sound way, not in just a lousy way. Say, just for the sake of it, I'm going to redefine it. No, you cannot do that. Okay, if people are talking about a revolution, then see what they mean by revolution. Okay, because a revolution might not, their definition of revolution might not be your definition of revolution. Like in Egypt, we have been calling all these revolutions revolutions. Well, actually, they might not fit academic definitions of revolution. Like how many, when you talk about an American revolution, what is the American revolution? The one that happened 1776. Okay, when you talk about the French Revolution, 1789. Iranian Revolution, 1979. Okay, Egyptian Revolution. Okay, so Arabi Revolution, 1881, or 1919 Revolution, or 1952 Revolution, or Sadat actually made a revolution called Reform Revolution, 1971. And now we have January 25th Revolution of 2011, and now we have a June 30th of 1213 revolution. How many revolutions we have? Are they really properly academically called revolutions? It's like having all these revolutions simply means like somebody quitting smoking 15 times. Okay, did he really quit smoking? Or no, he just said that there's an attempt of a revolution. So here the question becomes, okay, what is a revolution? Okay, what is a revolution? So yeah, media can call whatever it wants revolution, but what is a revolution? 1974, by the way, in Portugal, there was a coup d'etat that was later on called a revolution, and actually it was called the beginning of the Southern European Spring. That's when Portugal started, then Greece, then so many other countries. But the idea is it was a coup d'etat. So why did they call it a revolution? Okay, and so on. So you need sometimes to spend some time conceptualizing your concept, not just using any theoretical framework, because a revolution can be seen, can be used, misused, abused in a way that would not fit your piece of research. So sometimes you need to work on your concepts as if you are conceptualizing while actually you are at the same time, while you have a conceptual framework, but the conceptual framework does not fit your research enough. So that's why in some pieces of research, you might need both theoretical and conceptual framework. In some cases, you might use one of them. I'm sorry. Okay. Why? In some cases, theoretical framework provides you with major concepts needed for your research with their conceptualization. That is, it gives you the definition and the tools you need to observe and measure these concepts. Okay? Sometimes this happens. Sometimes no, you need to conceptualize as well. Besides having the theoretical framework, you might need to come up with your own conceptual effort to understand the phenomenon at hand. Okay, what if your research question is related to this? Explain what happened in Egypt in January 25th, on January 25th, 2011. Explain that to us. Anyway. It's better to build your research on a well-established theoretical framework. Don't sit down and just keep theorizing, telling us, oh, you know what, I was then at a cafe somewhere in Abbasiyah, and I noticed people going down the street shouting that they want to amend the constitution or they want to disband the cabinet. No, don't tell me your personal story. It's something appreciated, of course. You can be good if you are writing like a scenario or a script for a movie. But in our case, it's much better to find some kind of theoretical framework stemming from a model, a theory, a philosophy, or expert's opinion regarding the phenomena under his investigation. For instance, you can tell me it's a social contract issue. We used to have a social contract that we had under Nasser, that people are politically irrelevant, while socio-economically they are super citizens. People are going to get free education, free healthcare, they guarantee jobs after graduation from college or schools. They can have as many kids as they have as children, reproduce indefinitely. We're going to provide them with subsidies, food subsidies, tamween, and so on. So this was a social contract. Mubarak did not respect this social contract. He kept saying, oh, you are too many people, this is overpopulation, you guys are consuming too much, I cannot endure all that, and so on. So he did not respect the social contract, so people revolted against him. Okay, maybe an approach, but you need to show me how how the social contract under Nasser worked, under Mubarak worked, and how it worked in the beginning under Mubarak, and then it did not continue in the last couple of years. When did Mubarak breach it? Or you want to say, oh, Mubarak made a mistake. Mubarak liberalized too early. Somebody might say, I'm gonna use the democratization school literature and say if liberalization precedes democratization, a revolution might happen. If you give people the right to speak up without having institutional arrangements beforehand, so people are going to eventually revolt. This is what happened in Russia under Gorbachev. What did Gorbachev do is he liberalized. He adopted perestroika and glasnost and so on, so people started to speak up. You give the people in the prison, the people in the prison, the jailed people, the right to self-determination. So they decided to destroy the prison. They decided to destroy the Soviet Union. They decided to destroy Russia. Soviet Union decided to destroy Libya. Decided to destroy the ruling elite in Egypt. Okay, so now it is another school. It's democratization, liberalization before democratization led to that. Another school might be Marx's school. Okay, the skewness in income is increased to the point where people felt that they have to revolt. And when they revolted against Mubarak, this is the outcome of economic disparity. So here you need to see the Gini index to show how the skewness in income and wealth distribution ended up creating this gap between the haves and the have-nots, and we ended up with the revolution. Other school might say, no, it's because of modernization. Egypt did very well, or relatively well, at least among a group of people, and people started to ask for their political rights beside what they achieved in their economic rights. Especially that most of the people who revolted on January 25th were college graduates, middle class, and so on. So they were not the poor people, as Marx predicted. No, it's a modernization school. So people did well economically to the extent that they started to ask for their political rights. Somebody else might say, no, it's a domino effect. It is practically Egyptians found themselves influenced by what's happening in the world. Remember what like people in Palestine had elections in 2006. People in Iraq had elections after the United States invaded Iraq in 2003. People in Tunisia revolted against Ben Ali. So there is domino effect. The region was ripe for a revolution, and that's why there was an impact of what happened throughout the region on that. Of course, everything I'm saying right now is built on a theoretical framework of some sort. What if you want to use 2 or 3 of them? Okay, here you need conceptualization. You will need to take the major concepts from each one of these theoretical frameworks, each one of these models, and so on, and come up with your own conceptual framework to fit all that. So here you are not following one tradition. No, you are coming up with a new tradition if you want to. Of course, I mean, if people are undergrad, students are undergrad, we do not really expect them to come up with a new tradition, but it happens if you are doing a thesis, and definitely it's very let's say welcome when you are doing a dissertation for your PhD, because it's in a dissertation it is expected to be a contribution of some sort. So that's why don't get confused, because all that is for you very complicated explanation of ideas that are very simple in reality if you just get the big picture. Okay, so use any of the like theoretical frameworks that I just discussed. If you want to use a Marxist definition, Marxist tradition, fine. If you want to say domino effect, okay. If you want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, use 1 or 2 if you want, as long as this is consistent with your research question and the purpose of your study, and definitely with the consent of your supervisor. Oftentimes, these frameworks may come from an area outside of your immediate academic discipline. Yes, which is true. Some of you guys take classes in sociology, in anthropology, in media studies, in mass communication, in economics, and so on. You might find something there that is useful. You say, you know what, I'm going to apply something that I learned in another class to my research topic. So we are like a lake that's receiving its water, meaning its ideas, from all different creeks, like small rivers, from all kinds of sciences. For instance, rational choice theory has come to us from economics, and David Easton's system analysis emerged in biology. You know David Easton. That's another thing. You know, remember when he said inputs, outputs, processing, and feedback, and so on. This is a technique that you can use to tell us what were the inputs, what were the outputs, how the outputs did not fit into the stability. So it created a revolution in Egypt. Okay, rational choice theory. It has of course its own claims, but one of them is that all of us are rational calculators of our interests, of our benefits and costs. So it was in the best interest of revolutionaries to go out in revolution. Muslim Brotherhood, it was in their best interest to get into the revolution. SCAF is the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, found it its best interest to get rid of Mubarak and create more stability, and to get rid of the NDP, the National Democratic Party, and so on. So like America or the US at the time thought it's in their best interest to support this kind of revolution, and so on. So now you need to examine the theoretical claims made by the rational choice theory in the case of Egypt. Okay, Aristotle's concept of the body politique. He used this term, body politique, explaining that it's like a body. It has its organs, it has its mind, and so on. So the body politique gets affected by the environment around it, and so on. That was Aristotle's main idea. Hobbes as well made his basic assumptions about the state from physiology. Remember, even Leviathan itself as a book, the picture in front of the book is a strong man, and his body consists of the citizens of the state, and he has a sword in the right hand and has a torch in the left hand, indicating that the state consists of its people and they have to function. Even the taxes that they pay to the state is like the blood, like into the blood, and the sovereign, meaning the leader, is the brain, and so on. Okay, so all what I'm saying, all that is simply is you can make use of other claims made in other fields of study as well. Usually, this is something I would say it for excellent students, but I don't expect everybody to really build on that. There are many possible approaches, theoretical approaches, conceptual approaches to a topic. Strong research often involves drawing on various different theories and combining ideas. This is usually the best piece of research, which is you are not just a slave of one theoretical approach. You need to learn from others because each one of them is looking at the phenomenon from one aspect. It's exactly like when we say nowadays, what you see from here is not what you see from there. The same thing, what you see from a Marxist approach is not what you see from modernization school approach or political culture theoretical approach or others. So it's better to draw more on more than one theory. Okay, but at the same time, this is something to be discussed with your supervisor. Okay, if you want to build a theoretical approach or somehow a conceptual theoretical approach based on the fact that you don't have one. Okay, now you don't have one. Or you are not going to follow any of these. Of course, in IR, there are other approaches. In comparative politics, there are other approaches. In anthropology, there are other approaches. In sociology, each one of these have approaches. If you want to study, for instance, Muslim Brotherhood, there is something called group approach, a political group approach. If you want to study, for instance, the idea of democracy as an idea, there is an approach in political theory and political philosophy called history of political ideas, how ideas interact with historical settings and assumptions a philosopher makes about human mind and human society and so on. Okay, what if you do not have a theoretical approach? Follow 3 steps to build one for yourself. Identify key concepts. Number 1, what are the concepts that you are looking at? What are the concepts that you are looking at? For instance, in a world of globalization, okay, so this is one, the word globalization. There is something called gig economy, okay? I need to understand what gig economy. Of course, if you do good literature review, all this is not going to be that difficult. Gig economy has become an increasingly important segment of labor market. Here's another concept, okay? I don't know why it doesn't stop. Okay. People who are under 30s are more likely to engage in freelance, contracted, or zero our work arrangements instead of traditional full-time jobs. Research on the reasons for and consequences of this shift has focused on objective measures of income, working hours, employment condition, but there has been little work exploring young people's subjective experiences of the gift. Okay, here, now this is exactly like when you are coming up with your own research question and saying there is a gap in the literature. So has been little work done on like young people's experience. What is their experience? How do they see it? And how this has impacted inequality, since we are doing research in globalization and inequality. So this is globalization. This is one of the manifestations of globalization, gig economy. I'm creating now my theoretical framework. I'm just showing you how to create a theoretical framework. Okay, globalization is the big theme. Gig economy is one of the manifestations of globalization. This has a big impact on a large segment of labor market. So I need to understand what the labor market look like. Okay, what's really missing in the literature is how young people perceive all that. This is their own subjective experiences. Okay, already this is going to take me definitely to an empirical approach, I can guess. Meaning this approach will require them to speak up, to tell us how they perceive their experiences, maybe through surveys, questionnaires, focus group discussions, and so on. Okay, and how this impacts inequality, especially if you compare them to their elders, like fathers, mothers, and so on. Okay, if I'm working on gig economy, I have flexible work hours and so on, and I'm paid in dollars, for instance. Okay, I'm much better like that, or I should have a traditional full-time jobs, right? So this can be another point of conceptualization and theorization to come up with a theoretical framework. So my questions are, what are the main factors in young people's decision to engage in the gig economy? I'm going to ask them about that. So my research question is going to take me to an empirical approach based on data collection, firsthand, primary sources. I cannot rely, unless there is a survey that has been done by somebody and I'll be using the data, this is going to be secondary source of information. To what extent do experiences of the gig economy differ by gender, race, and class? Okay, people who, men versus women, people who are coming from affluent families versus people who are not, and class, people who, I'm sorry, race, race is people who are whatever, Kurds versus Arabs, Shia versus Sunni, whatever, Christians versus Muslims, and so on, and class, socioeconomic differences. Socioeconomic class. How did this gig economy impact income inequality among people? Does this inequality have any electoral ramifications? Do you think now, since you have become part of a global world or a globalized world, do you think now, oh, how come that we do not have elections in Egypt like the one the United States had between Trump and Biden? Why we don't have this sense of change? Okay, so being part of the gig economy, being part of the globalized economy, does it have any electoral ramifications? So I need as well to examine this concept, right? And so on. So in this research problem, there are several key concepts that need to be explored, as well as defining what's meant by gig economy. The theoretical framework could discuss how scholars have theorized concepts. Of course, you can go to other researchers and see how they did with gig economy. You are not the first person on earth to deal with this concept. No, I need to know what it is. Okay, what's electoral behavior? What's meant by here? Electoral inequality. What's inequality? And so on. It could also draw in theories about gender, race, class in the labor market as well. Sure, you are going to find others who did the research in this regard. So number one, come up with your own research question, your problem statement or whatever. So you would eventually find within it your concepts, your main concepts. Evaluate relevant definition, theories, and models. Again, this your literature review. If you really do sound strong, deep literature review, most of what I'm saying is not going to be that difficult. So, how previous researchers have defined and drawn connections between these key concepts. Are they related, not related? If they are not related, can you come up with a connection? Okay, but again, it's going to be built on reasoning, sound reasoning. As you write the theoretical framework, aim to compare and critically evaluate the approaches that different authors have proposed. You can, while you are writing your own theoretical definition, theoretical framework, you can tell, I found X did 1, 2, 3, 4, Y did, and so on, and you can compare them. So I'm not going to use this or that. I'm going to be adopting something else. Or you can say, whatever, I'm going to be defining economic inequality or income inequality according to X, I'm going to define gig economy according to Y, and you have to tell us why you made this combination. Why didn't you follow? Basically, you can do anything as long as you have logic and you can defend your logic, show and defend your logic. After discussing different models and theories, you establish the definition that best fit your research and justify why this is the case. In more complex research projects, you might combine theories from different fields to build your own unique framework, okay? So we don't expect you to do that if you are doing something for undergrad. Make sure to mention the most important theories related to your key concepts. If there a well-established theory or model that you do not want to apply to your own research, explain why it is not suitable for your purposes. That's another important thing, because when you are doing your theoretical framework, everybody has been using nation-building approach. Identity crisis, distribution crisis, participation crisis, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's understood. So why you are not using it? Why you are not using that? You are going to use leadership approach, focusing on the deficiencies, the wrong decisions made by Hafez al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad, not on the nation-building approach. Okay, why then? Why is it the case? Why you are not using that? Is this something new you will learn, or we will learn by using leadership approach rather than nation-building approach? We'd like to know that. Okay. Show what your research will contribute. Apart from discussing other people's theories and ideas, the theoretical framework should aim to show how your own project fits in. Will you test a theory or contribute new evidence by collecting original, qualitative, or quantitative data? Are you going to show us something that we do not know? Had Saddam Hussein done 1, 2, 3, 4, despite all the crises he had, or the crises he had. Yes, he had distribution crisis and identity crisis and participation crisis and legitimacy crisis and penetration crisis. They have all of them, but he could done 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 4, and he could have solved that. You can say, here is Saddam Hussein and here is Nelson Mandela. South Africa had the same exact penetration crisis, blah, blah, blah problems, the nation building problems that Saddam Hussein had. But Nelson Mandela did 1, 2, 3, 4, and Saddam Hussein did 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's a leadership issue rather than it is a nation building issue. Okay, now I would say, okay, good luck. You are doing something really intriguing, interesting, illuminating, enlightening. We're going to learn from that. Okay? We'll use a theory as a basis for interpreting and understanding your data. Yeah, it can happen. You can say that I'll be always testing or understanding the claims from the Marxist lenses. Economy, economy, economy. It's economy stupid. Okay? I will focus on how the economic structure, which Marx called the substructure, is controlling the superstructure, which is the tools that the state has, to interpret what's happening in Saudi Arabia, what's happening in rentier states. You see, Marx can tell us, oh yeah, those petrodollar countries are rentier states that can be explained by Marxist theoretical framework. Yeah, if the state is in control of petrodollar, of the money coming from dollars, this would make the state very strong and the society very weak. People are going to be just demanding their socioeconomic rights as gifts from the state rather than being controlling the state. The state does not need society. Society needs the state. You see, in the great majority of democracies, the states depend on societies and its revenues in the form of taxes. You see, I need to tax, as a state, I need to tax people so I can get the budget for defense, for education, for transportation, and so on. But in rentier states, actually, no. It is the state that has the money and it gives society. In American context, no representation, no representation, no taxation. If we don't let us being represented in the Congress or in the Parliament, they were talking to the British colonial power, if you don't let Americans get represented in the Parliament, then don't tax us. Tax us only if we are represented in the Parliament. That's why the American Revolution took place eventually. But it is the opposite in the rentier state. Okay, no taxation, no representation. If you do not tax us, we don't need to be represented. Okay, just give us the money and that's it. Okay, so here you can use a Marxist theoretical framework and say Marx provides us, or this Marxist reading provides us with insights to explain the relationship between state and society in rentier states, in states that has lots of oil owned by the state, not by the people. So the state controls society because it pays for people's salaries. It is society of موظفين. And if there is a middle class, it is not independent middle class. Like in Europe and the US and so on. No, they are middle class of state employees. So they work for the state. They are more conservative even than the state. They want to maintain the status quo. They don't want democracy. Okay. So here I'm using a theory, which is Marxist theoretical framework, as a basis for interpreting data that I collected, for instance, about petrodollar states and so on. Does your project critique or challenge an established theory? Might be another interesting thing. I would say I disagree with, for instance, the political culture approach that says Egyptians are not ready for democracy. I'm going to collect data and see if Egyptians are provided with institutional arrangements that lead to democracy, including, of course, you have to define what democracy is, peaceful transfer of power, free, fair elections, and so on. So Egyptians, if they find an actual, factual, sound, and logical institutional arrangements for democracy, are they going to reject it? Or no, it is not their culture, it is their institutions. You know, when I remember I wrote it in my book, I said people are claiming that people in the Arab world are not barking for democracy. Barking يعني ينبح, like dogs. You know, dogs in the West are not bad, they're good creatures. Are they barking for democracy? بينبحوا من أجل الديمقراطية. Or they are barking and when we are not listening to them. You see, they might be asking for democracy, but we are not listening to them. It is based on the previous when Charles Holmes, yes, said that a group of thieves could have broken into a palace and stole from it. And the dogs didn't bark. The dogs didn't say anything. So he asked, why didn't they bark? Okay. Eventually made the conclusion that the people who stole the house actually, I'm sorry, robbed the house. I'm sorry, robbed the house. Actually, were servants in the house, so the dogs did not bark. The same thing. Okay, do Arabs and Muslims and Egyptians hate democracy? So I'm going to challenge the emphasis, the overemphasis on people's opinions and attitudes. No, I don't think so. If they are provided with proper democratic institutional arrangements, including free, fair elections and so on, most people would participate with actual, of course, like you need as well to define what do you mean by free, fair, what do you mean by democratic elections, free, fair, competitive, multiple, and so on. Okay? Are you combining theoretical approaches in a new, unique way? Yes, you need to tell us that. If you are doing that, you need to conceptualize, you need to show us the relationship. So it does not, you might say it might be it's not true that modernization school that economic development will lead to democracy. You might say, no, actually democracy might lead to economic development. And I need to see your own argument about that. How you are going to use a different approach or different theoretical approaches to come up with a new way of looking at the phenomenon and so on. If relevant, you can also use the theoretical framework to develop hypotheses for your research. Yes, actually, your theoretical framework is always going to tell you that X is related to Y. So the more X, the more Y, or the less Y. Okay, so it's going to be your mission is to measure X and measure Y in a quantitative way to tell us how this happens. A hypothesis, as you can tell from last session, makes a testable prediction about the outcome of a specific study, while a theory is overarching explanation for why and how certain outcomes happen in general. In other words, when you come up with a hypothesis, this is about a specific study. You are talking about Egypt, for instance, or Sudan, or whatever. But what if what we found is I found X causes Y in Sudan, X causes Y in Saudi Arabia, X causes Y in Egypt, X causes Y, and so on. Then I can actually come up with an explanation that is more like law-like generalization. It is a generalization that looks like a law in a way or another. You see, there is a trend among all like, for instance, democracies do not fight wars against each other. This is true about America and all the wars it went through. France and all the wars it went through. Britain and all the wars it went through. Japan and all the wars it went through. Okay, so this is not just a hypothesis to be tested that democracies do not fight wars against each other. Actually, no. It is more of a law-like generalization. We can claim that this is a law-like generalization. And maybe your research is why this happens, why democracies do not fight wars against each other. Is something in the nature of the democratic decision-making process? Is it something related to the nature of the elite that come up out of the democratic process? Is it the nature of the public opinion in these countries? Is it something related to interdependent or interdependence among these countries, and so on? So you might explain to me why democracies do not fight wars against each other, while a democracy can fight a war against a dictatorship, and a dictatorship can fight war against another dictatorship. You see, but why not two democracies fight a war against each other since they became democracies? Since they became democracies. Hopefully, this helped you. Uh, Theoretical framework is the cement that glues your bricks together, your concepts together. This what would eventually lead you to come up with a convincing, a logically convincing analysis. Okay? Stay safe, stay good. See you guys next session. Bye bye. اهو هو ده بقى.
طيب انا عشان احنا لسه ما عملناش ستوب ريكوردينج.
كل ده لسه شغالين.
مادام دي منورة
قول مش ريكوردينج.